Young men today are more boned than a dinosaur exhibit. So boned that, as we're about to see, most will likely never be able to dig themselves out of the hole they're in on their own. And the only people who could help them won't. Today, as we finish up our timeline of the dating collapse, we're going to look at why it's so hard for boomers and Xers to accept that young men can't necessarily fix their problems all on their own, and how their refusal to help has affected the trajectory of Western society. So let's rewind one more time and finish the story. The 2010s, the bubble times are officially over. Men in the West are not equal, especially economically. Wealth is more concentrated at the top than ever, and only the most successful men can provide things that used to be basic, like a house. This means women now feel like only the best of men can give her enough, while social media and apps now give her a fake feeling of access to the best of men. So we now have a very small pool of haves who get all of the attention from women, and a large portion of have-nots who get quite literally nothing. If you're a guy, this sucks. But when these guys try to talk about these problems with cultural, institutional, or church leaders, they're met with a brick wall, because these older guys tend to believe none of this stuff is real. And if there are problems, they typically assume it's the guy's fault, and women are typically assumed to be innocent. Now, to understand where they're coming from, we need to look at a few of the ways this whole story conflicts with their core beliefs. First, the data itself is incompatible with their worldview. The older men and women in charge, especially in the church, tend to have a more conservative, individualist mindset. They believe a man's outcomes in life stem entirely from his personal effort. So if young men can't get women, the only possible explanation is that they didn't try hard enough. Now, I do agree that taking ownership and doing the work will make your life way better than casting blame. However, the data also tells us there are hard limits on what each man is capable of achieving on his own. For example, IQ. IQ determines a man's capacity to solve problems and do complex tasks, and that alone has made it one of the most accurate predictors of a person's outcomes in life. It's also not changeable. It's like the engine in your car. It has a set horsepower, and that is it. That is the most it will ever have. You can't make your car any faster by exercising it or driving it harder. It's hardware limited. Same with your brain. Some men have a V8 up in their noggin, while others are struggling uphill with a 3-cylinder Toyota Tercel engine, and that severely limits what he can achieve on his own. Another hard limit is social capacity. Finally putting my psych degree to use. When you're a kid, your brain's development isn't just additive, it's subtractive on a physical level. You start off with bazillions of neural pathways in your brain, and the ones that don't get used as you develop are pruned and shut down permanently. Most of this happens before you turn 3, and at 10 to 12 years old, you're basically done for life. There's no going back. So if you didn't get enough social development during those formative years, because you were an iPad kid or your parents hardcore homeschooled you or whatever, no amount of effort later in life will ever catch you up to the people who did. Things like this set a brick wall limit on how high men can reach through their individual effort, which means that even though all men can grow, learn, and improve, and their lives will be way better if they do, it's also possible for women to set their standards so high that most men will not be able to reach them within their lifetime. Also, keep in mind, the world is way more complicated now than it's ever been before. Today, you have to navigate bloated bureaucracies, office politics, HR rules, complex technologies, internet AI, and on, and that takes a way higher IQ than digging potatoes out of the ground or picking berries to survive. Heck, it's more than even just back in the 60s before we got rid of all the simple manufacturing jobs that a man used to be able to buy a house with. And don't forget how we've been watching men get completely nerfed by society and the way we raise them either. put that together, and we're now seeing average men begin to fall below the minimum threshold of capability needed to have normal things like a wife.
Some people just put yourself out there. Just work out, work on yourself, and things will work out. There's this whole crop of people who I think are trying really hard. I don't think they're losers. I don't think they're pathetic or anything like that. I think there's something about the architecture of how these people are built so that standard advice does not apply to them.
And the trouble is, that scenario simply isn't possible to the men in charge because they grew up in a time of abundance when all you needed was to reach out and grab your slice of that abundance. And sure, it took hard work, but they could trust they'd be rewarded for it. So the concept that a man could max himself out and still fall far short just doesn't compute to them because there's no place to fit the data into their mental model of the world.
What do you mean?
You process this however you need to process it. If you want to keep talking it out.
Which one are you dating?
Both.
Are you dating Cece?
I'm dating Cece.
Are you dating Elizabeth?
Yes.
How do you do that?
They made me choose.
You have to choose. You can't have both women.
What was I supposed to do?
What, you think you can have a bunch of wives? You got one wife! This is the way the world works!
Why?
I don't know.
To really see what's happening, their worldview would have to change at a fundamental level. And in most cases, that's a bit too much to ask for, especially because of our second roadblock. This is where things start to get a little more emotional. These institution leaders, especially pastors and church elders, are at least partly responsible for teaching the women, influencing their growth, and holding them accountable. If what young men are saying about women's standards and behavior is true, it implies they failed to do that badly. Their conscience intuitively knows that if this stuff is true, then they contributed to the single men's struggles, and that makes them feel guilty, a feeling they'll do anything to get away from. Because guilt just doesn't make you feel kind of down on yourself. Guilt says, hey, you harmed someone else, so you're obligated to fix what you did to them. And that's what makes this really tough. The men in charge, like everyone else, hate feeling obligated to do something for someone else. Partly because of their worldview, but also partly because they're just slammed. Their lives aren't easy either. They've got a family to provide for, kids to raise, and they're exhausted, so they feel maxed out already. It's way easier to tell themselves, oh, this is just another whiny liberal trying to guilt them into giving time and energy that they don't have to fix someone else's problems that aren't their responsibility. Now, at this point, you might be wondering why all this individual responsibility only ever seems to fall on the men. For example, if a man is lonely, it's entirely his own fault and his responsibility to fix alone. But if a woman is lonely, that is also men's fault and men's responsibility to fix for her. And this brings us to our third roadblock, the pursuit narrative. This one's a little weirder, so follow me for a second. We know women generally aren't attracted to most men. That also means most men have never experienced a woman behaving truly sexual towards him and showing him strong desire, even once they're married, which leads most men to believe that women simply aren't sexual. Now, we know from the increase of women consuming pornography and increasing rates of female infidelity that women are incredibly sexual creatures. They're just also very selective about who they're sexual with. Now, I understand this is a touchy, uncomfortable subject for a lot of guys, especially married guys who've had that experience where their wives simply just don't want them. She's always making excuses. I'm tired. I've got a headache. She just never shows attraction or desire to him. It's a lot easier on his ego to believe that, well, that's just because women don't have libido. Women don't want sex. Men are the ones with sex drive. And that's way easier than believing that his wife would want sex, just not with him. The problem is this also affects their perception of the dating collapse. Because they believe women are these sort of pure, non-sexual creatures, and that desire for men is something that guys have to go coax out of the women because that's been their experience. They also believe that men have this sort of natural duty to pursue women. They must be the ones who chase, even though that's not the example we see in the Bible, unless the husband is chasing a whore, but that's another topic. So they often assume that because it's the man's job to pursue women, if relationships aren't happening, it's the men's fault because the men aren't stepping up and doing their job. Now, that doesn't line up with self-report or choice-based data. Women do not find it attractive when men chase them. In fact, they more often see pursuing as desperation or neediness, which can turn even an attractive man into a disgusting ick in her eyes in just a few minutes. So it's not real. But the pursuit narrative does match up with the complaints the men in charge are hearing from the single women. And this brings us to our fourth and final barrier for now. The older guys misunderstand how women see men. So you've probably heard women complaining that the guys won't ask me out. Now, what these ladies failed to mention is that when they say the guys, they aren't talking about all men, just the small handful they find attractive. The reality is there's a lot of guys who would ask her out if she'd let them anywhere near her, and there are probably a lot of guys who have. Now, what's interesting is she's not lying, or at least she doesn't think she is. When women see unattractive men, their brain literally does not register that they've seen a human. They're just not a part of her world, any more than a doorknob or a piece of furniture.
There's a study, they watched women's brains on a brain scan, and they said that with really unattractive men, really low value men, that they saw them as not even there, that they didn't register people in their brains at all.
This is what we call the not people zone. A dozen of these guys could flirt with her, show interest, even ask her out, and she'd still say none of the guys will talk to her. And she's telling the truth, because sure, yeah, creatures asked her out, but the actual people men didn't. And it gets even worse. That small group of successful men that women can see are often spoiled with so much attention from so many women that they ignore most of them and treat the rest pretty badly. So when women complain about dating, that is what they're talking about. The poor treatment and lack of attention they get from a handful of men at the top. But of course, they don't say it that way. They just say it's the men. So when older people hear that, they instantly believe it's all men. And they go into defend the damsel mode against all men.
It's the men that have to step up.
Not realizing that most of those guys did try, but the girls didn't see them as people. And the leaders don't see just how frustrated and heartbroken those guys in the not people zone are.
26 years old and never had a girlfriend.
27 years old, never kissed a girl on the lips before, which of course means I've never had a girlfriend before, never dated anyone before, and it fucking kills me. I'm not gonna lie.
And again, it's even worse for Christians because we tend to think we're immune to these things. Because, yeah, sure, secular women might have impossibly high standards or treat most men like they don't exist, but a real Christian woman would never. Even though anyone in the trenches can tell you that's not how it works. Oftentimes, the more spiritual a Christian woman is, the higher her standards are for men in every category, earthly and spiritual. She feels like her godliness makes her deserve an even higher class of man than those dirty worldly women, meaning Christian women often have higher standards, not lower. At least until she reaches the age where her looks start to fade and she stops getting attention from the guys she's aiming at, so the reality sets in that she has to settle. At that point though, a lot of the guys have already checked out because they got tired of the heartache, but we'll talk more about that later. Now, I should mention, a lot of older married guys have told me, so what? These guys should just be more assertive and push through all of those barriers that women are putting up. And for sure, yeah, being assertive works for guys who are close to the people zone, because that display of confidence can push you over the edge. But for the guys who aren't there yet and they're still deep in the not people zone, if he tries to make himself known to her and assert his way into the people zone, her natural reaction will most often be fear. Her gut reaction is something like, ew, this creepy microbe is forcing me to acknowledge him as a person? This is gross, and I'm scared now because I don't want this and he's not taking the hint. Somebody please get me out of here. That will often get him labeled a creep. since girls talk, that can ruin his chances with the rest of the women as well. That's also assuming she didn't file any legal charges against him, which I have seen happen, but we'll come back to that in a minute. At this point, feminism has won so big for so long that even conservative Christians don't realize how many feminist premises they accept. And nearly everyone treats women like they are gods. Remember, that was the original goal of feminism, and at this point, it has worked. Functionally, women are worshipped by men and each other. Men are expected to make sacrifices to women, like their time, effort, money, preferences, even their hobbies. And men are expected to perform all of their duties to women, while it's considered immoral and selfish for a man to ask that a woman perform any duties for him. People act like it's morally wrong to criticize women or say anything negative about them. Women's feelings are treated like a sort of divine revelation. And even when they don't match reality, saying so is treated like heresy. And nearly all men tiptoe around those feelings in fear, because in our culture, upsetting a woman is one of the worst sins a man can commit. If you do upset a woman, you will pay for it, socially and emotionally. Because of all this, women now command nearly absolute power over their homes, churches, schools, and more, often regardless of how conservative or complementarian they claim to be. Because don't forget, men are raised mostly by women and trained to seek the approval of women. When women take that approval away, they get their way. Now you have to admit, this kind of fear, reverence, and total obedience is strikingly similar to the way most cultures would treat a god. Now, it makes sense that a culture who got rid of God would create a new one. I mean, we'll always find something to worship. And it's easy to see women as goddesses because their beauty and their sweetness can make them seem divine and transcendent. Now, what's really interesting is that it's not just the secular world that's doing this. Christians are displaying many of those same worship behaviors with women. We'll talk about that more over on Patreon, so check that out if you want. But we didn't just create new gods, we needed a new devil as well. If women are this culture's gods, then men are now functionally the devil. This is why we have no problem berating men for every little mistake they make, while it feels morally wrong to criticize women at all. You don't criticize God because that's wrong, but you do beat the snot out of the devil if you can because he deserves it, right? So that's exactly what we do. People now celebrate when bad things happen to men because it's only right, after all. Now for feminists, this also solves another problem. See, someone has to make decisions, right, about where we're gonna go, how we're gonna get there, and other people eventually have to submit their will to it. You gotta get on board or you're not gonna go anywhere. But in Marxist feminist logic, submission is degrading to people, so that's a problem. Unless you say they aren't people. It's not a human rights violation if they're not a human, right? This is what the intersectional feminist oppression scoreboard was made for. If you're a woman, you score high as oppressed and therefore deserving of power and praise. If you're a man, you score high on being an evil oppressor. So you deserve to be subjugated, humiliated, and have your human dignity surgically removed because you were born a criminal monster. And hey, that's justice, baby. With this, women can be worshipped, get their revenge, and have all that power they've always wanted without feeling guilty about dominating other people in a system that says dominance is evil. Genius. Feminism has now won. They got what they wanted. They checked every box.
Not being a woman in general, right, ladies? I'm just kidding. It's easy. Shut up, bitches. We have everything. We have everything we've ever wanted.
So let's check in on women's well-being, because that was the goal, right? Women's mental health is now abysmal. It's been plummeting for decades, and now it reaches historical all-time lows. Now, of course, feminists claim this is due to the patriarchy that still oppresses them somehow. Except studies show the happiest women are conservative Christian housewives and mothers, the most oppressed women of all. Getting rid of Christianity and male leadership didn't make women any safer like they promised either. Practicing Christian households consistently score as the safest living arrangements for women by a country mile. Most women are also now stuck in dead-end jobs that they hate, while the successful women who made a career out of it often had to sacrifice having children for that career and now deeply regret it.
Women have fought hard to ensure that our generation had an equal place in the workforce.
And to all those women, we just want to say,
thank you. But also, you. I am so tired.
Sexual liberation has not liberated women from men at all. The only difference is the pool of men that women find attractive enough for them has shrunk.
Guys, we went below 100,000. We went below 6 feet tall. It is 1.5% of men that you guys are describing.
And those men now have no reason to stay loyal to them or treat them well. So they don't. We should also mention the #MeToo witch hunts around this time, which make it genuinely dangerous for men to approach women, and also makes women very confused why men don't approach women anymore.
If I looked like you, I would just keep my fucking mouth shut.
Now, feminism won, but it looks an awful lot like things got worse for women, not better. We're almost there, 2020 and beyond. The virus forces people indoors, which means they now have to date entirely online. Before the lockdowns, most people didn't date online because there was still kind of a stigma around it. When a girl asked you, how come you're on Hinge? What she really meant was, what's wrong with you? But once online dating was the only option, that stigma went away, and online became the primary way to meet people. The problem is, in-person dating is still slightly more fair to average men, while online dating skews heavily in favor of the top 5% or less. Now that basically every woman is at least checking online to see what her options are, this slams the door on the dating chances of most average men. This creates a problem for women, though, since there aren't enough attractive and successful men to go around for all the women who feel they deserve one. Many women solve this problem either by aiming at much older men or sharing men. The strategy they use for this is to advertise themselves to a wide audience and get the attention of these men by sexualizing their appearance. They then give the attractive men easy access to sex, hoping that her sex will lock him down and motivate him to stay with her. This has mixed results.
Biggest red flag in a girl nowadays is if she has a link in her bio.
I am so sorry to break your heart like this. I am so sorry.
You were doing so good.
But, yeah.
At the same time, though, another trend pops up. It looks totally bizarre from the outside, but it's actually a brilliant strategy that gets around a lot of these problems. As the economy struggles to recover from the shutdowns, the jobs that feminism sold to women are becoming more of a struggle. So a number of conservative women begin to strike up a deal with men. You guys go do all that hard work for us like you used to back in the 50s, and we'll go back to being feminine, wearing cute dresses, and keeping the house all cute and tidy for you. And tradwifism is born. Now, this is a fantastic arrangement for women. The trouble is, only a tiny fraction of men are able to afford it. So for most guys, your only options at this point are a woman who despises men or a woman you can't afford. Unless you're willing to risk it for an ex-party girl or single mom, that is. See, there's another pattern of behavior hitting its peak around this time too. A lot of the women who were sleeping around in their 20s find that as they get older, they get less attention from the high-level men they want. But they also can't get attention from the low-level guys they've been rejecting because they've been rejecting them. And those guys typically don't want a woman who slept with anywhere from 30 to 300 men.
We have a saying for you. OnlyFans detected, opinion rejected.
So these women find a clever workaround. As they start to hit 30, they convert to Christianity and say, I'm washed clean, my past is gone, and you can't hold it against me. Now, some of these women do deserve a second chance, and I mean that. Problem is, many of these women didn't repent. They're doing exactly what it looks like they're doing, looking for a man to exploit. This sparks a heated debate among Christians. White knights and blue pill tradcons see these women as innocent angels who've been reformed and redeemed, even if they don't really vet them to find out for sure. So they push the single guys at these women, saying, look, you're complaining about being single. Here's a woman that needs a man. You're being selfish if you say no. The guys look at that and just go, no, what you're asking for isn't sacrificial love, it's enabling. The fact that men like us constantly come in and take these women's consequences off of their shoulders onto our own is the reason why they keep doing this stuff. Now, speaking of enabling, we really need to talk about the only girls to Christian influencer pipeline because it's getting out of hand. But we'll have to save that for another time because there's another reason these guys are hesitant. See, we've talked a lot about how hard it is for men to get a woman these days, but we haven't looked at the kind of woman he's most likely to be rewarded with if he does become everything she wants. So let's paint the picture. Today, most women are mentally unstable. They're depressed, anxious, and most can't regulate their own emotions, so they expect the world to change and adapt to her feelings to keep them regulated for her. Most are physically unhealthy as well. More than half are overweight, undisciplined, and unable to say no to their impulses or any of their cravings, and it's a crime to call them out on it, so it's unlikely they will ever get healthy. Speaking of which, most have been raised with so little accountability that they're incapable of seeing any flaws in themselves or admitting that they're wrong. So good luck when you run into conflicts with this woman, which you will. Most refuse to support a man and often simply can't cook, can't clean, can't do anything of value. And even if they can, they'd flat refuse because I'm your wife, not your maid. She won't offer him affection, encouragement, reassurance, appreciation, or any of the things she expects from him. She's entitled. She expects the man to keep her entertained with witty banter all the time like all the other couples on Insta, and maintain a constant adventure of events and trips to fun places. And if you bore her, she will find someone else. She comes preloaded with a bunch of bad spending habits, a massive student loan from a degree she won't use, and a mountain of consumer debt that she expects you to pay off for her. And that debt is collecting interest, so tick tick. She also has no intention of respecting her man. She will be combative, bossy, abrasive, disagreeable, anti-submissive, and he is expected to handle her. She's also getting a ton of bad relationship advice from jealous friends and Instagram reels, which tell her to leave you if you won't peel an orange for her or some arbitrary red flag somebody thought up of to get some views. Don't forget all the years she spent giving her body away to lock down men she thought were better than you. So now she has a body count and possibly a kid from another man, which statistically increases her chances of leaving you. And as loose as she was with those better men, she's not going to make herself that available to you. Because now that she's got you, sex isn't about acquiring you, it's about controlling you. So most of the time, she's gonna be locked down tighter than Fort Knox. And oh, by the way, thanks to her high standards, she most likely feels like she settled for you. And she'll likely take it out on you for the rest of your life because she resents you for not being the man she really wanted. But hey, she's pretty, I guess, right? So yeah, guys are starting to hesitate because it takes huge effort to become enough for a woman. And now the woman he's likely to get for all of that looks more like a punishment than a reward. Now, side note, for years, I've heard my Christian friends say in response to all this, yes, totally, secular women are terrible, aren't they? See, this is why you just gotta get a girl who loves the Lord. Forget about everything else, all your other preferences, all the other stuff you want. Just focus on her faith and you won't have any of these problems. The assumption is that a woman who loves the Lord, serves at the church, takes notes during the sermon, does all the churchy things, will be immune to all of these flaws. The problem is, nobody actually checks in on the good Christian girls to find out for sure. Because women are cute and sweet, while the aggressive masculine traits of boys are seen as a bad thing, Christians tend to fall for the myth that women are naturally just better people than men. We then assume that women don't need to be held accountable directly like men do. Since we're here, let me peel back the curtain and show you what this actually looks like. In most churches, men are held accountable everywhere. From the pulpit, in books and teachings, in men's groups, men are constantly told exactly how they suck and need to do better. But because women are incredibly sensitive about their reputation, for reasons we'll explain in a minute, they get very upset if anything even touches their public image. Along with that, most guys seem to have this white knight instinct to defend their women's honor. In practice, this means that men get held accountable and called out in public, but accountability for women is considered a private matter, something to be handled exclusively behind closed doors. So church leaders and elders typically pass that job off to male heads of households, women's ministries, and counseling offices, and each of those has major problems. First, there are some very good counselors out there who will tell women when they're being the problem, but good luck finding a good one.
I don't believe this. I don't believe you.
And people usually don't go to those counselors until things are so bad that they have no choice, because that's just how the system is designed. They're supposed to be the backstop when things get explosively bad, so they can't play a regular role in spiritual formation and constant accountability. As for male heads of household, they know they don't have any support behind them, because even if he technically has the authority to hold her accountable, she has all the practical leverage. She can withhold sex or make him feel terrible about it, and nobody at church is going to care or do anything about it because they're afraid of offending their own wives for the same reason. So even if he can do it, she can make it cost so much that it's just not worth it. Most men now hold back accountability because the consequences are worse for him than they are for her. On top of that, women can point to plenty of sermons about all their husbands' faults and mistakes and say, look at what Pastor so-and-so said, you need to do this better. Men have nothing to point to at all. So men know they don't have the day-to-day backing to do the job, even if they want to. And they don't always want to, because men have a strong instinct to defend the honor of their women. They like to be the hero, right? The knight in shining armor who protects women when they cry out for help, even if the thing they're protecting her from is the truth. They also tend to view their women through rose-colored glasses, especially their daughters. Full and fair accountability would mean admitting that his sweet little angels are actually just as depraved as the boys. They're just better at hiding it. And apparently that's too much for most men to handle. And it's no better in women's ministries either. Because again, there are some very good women's ministry leaders out there, but they can't be at every table. And according to my wife and other women I've known who go to those ministries, women are simply incapable of policing each other. Because the truth often hurts, and accountability hurts even more. And women are simply too sensitive to each other's feelings to call each other out for anything specific. They're also rightfully afraid of being alienated from the group by other women if they get labeled as the one who's not nice to us. So no, women cannot police themselves in their own ministries. They need men. But the reality is, most men are not strong enough to handle a woman's hatred and disapproval. So church leaders pass the accountability buck to husbands, who pass it on to women's ministries, who then pass it nowhere in particular, and nobody checks in to see where it went. Because functionally, we believe women are better people than men. So we're strict with men and loose with women. And it's at this point we begin reaping the rotten fruit of that imbalance. At this point, not all, but many Christian women who love the Lord and do the churchy things are just as unstable, disrespectful, emotionally manipulative, entitled, promiscuous, and controlling as their secular counterparts. The only difference is they're more polite about it. And again, they hide it better. Now, I know some will still say, no, our women are immune to all this because they study the Bible and God's word itself keeps them in line. Not if they're reading that Bible through a twisted lens, it won't. Turns out that there's a lot of stuff we didn't talk about with women, and the world has filled in the gaps we didn't talk about. Today, the feminist premises we saw through the first 3 parts of this series now shape even conservative women's concept of good and bad so strongly that it distorts the way they interpret scripture. So no, our women are not guaranteed to be better. And the few left who genuinely are healthy, faithful wife material are usually unattainable to most men. So at this point, men are now tired. They're tired of being alone, despised, blamed, bled dry and discarded, and they're especially sick of constant double standards. A list that seems to grow almost every day.
That one Billie Eilish quote, she said,
"You give an ugly guy a chance, he thinks he rules the world."
As a young man coming up, you see how they're just trying to put you down, okay? Now, if the roles were reversed, this would be a cancelable offense.
Now, frustration begins to boil over, and the red pill finally breaks into the mainstream. Hyperbolic caricatures of manhood, like Andrew Tate and such, become superstars almost overnight due to viral clips that resonate with the legitimate frustrations of single young men.
Firstly, you're confusing 1% of men with all men. The majority of men have no money, no power, no sex from their wife.
Fact.
So most men, their life sucks.
Now remember, the red pill started as men just trading notes about their experiences with women and realizing they'd been lied to about how women operate. From there, they were simply trying to figure out what women actually do respond well to, what they don't, and why. And to young men who are frustrated and tired of failing with women, this is a breath of fresh air. Because some of these guys actually are fairly reasonable red pill teachers who do offer the guys some stuff that's actually useful. So a number of men begin to find hope that they can finally succeed with women. And a few of them actually do. Over time though, as it became more obvious how many ways men are positively boned right now, the red pill began to spawn a bunch of other movements, like men's rights, MGTOW, the warband, and so on, all of which are now parts of a larger subculture of men called the manosphere. Now, the red pill is not the manosphere, but the lines between the movements are so blurred that people on the outside now confuse and conflate them all together. Now, this is great news for people who already don't like the red pill, because the often bitter behavior of its adjacent movements makes it easier to attack once you conflate them. And no surprise, top among the red pill's opponents are women. Now, it makes sense why they'd hate the red pill and want to delete it. It teaches men to be strong, and since weak men have been enabling women to dominate our culture, that makes the red pill a threat to their power. And remember, they believe they need that power to be safe, valuable, and happy. It also exposes the specific methods women use to manipulate and control men at a personal level. And they instinctively know that once men are aware of what they're doing, they won't get their way anymore. And that's a pretty strong reason to cry out that the red pill is an evil, woman-hating cesspool that men should protect women from. Probably the biggest reason they hate it, though, is that women also seem to have a visceral hatred of anything that makes them look bad, which likely comes straight from their survival instincts. Since women are more vulnerable than men, they rely on the community for protection and provision much more than men do, which makes women instinctively feel like their reputation is hugely important for their survival. They want to be seen as generous, kind, giving, romantic, altruistic, and loving, because then she'll be seen as a benefit to the community, which will make her more likely to be welcomed and protected. This also means anything that paints her in a bad light instinctively feels like a threat to her life, because it might lead to her being pushed out of the community. This is why anytime you say anything negative about a woman, she'll typically either deflect it and shift the blame away, or she'll shame you, try to make you feel like a horrible person until you shut your filthy mouth about it. And of course, the red pill exposes that women are not altruistic and generous with men. They're actually quite practical and focused on their own needs. So women feel like it paints them in an ungenerous light, which feels like a threat to her safety and makes women react viscerally against it and the men who speak it. What's interesting, though, is that many conservative Christian men link arms with feminists and attack the red pill as well. A lot of these men do this because they feel threatened, which we'll talk more about in future videos. So joining forces, this odd couple begins to make fun of the red pill. They slap nasty labels like misogyny and bigotry on it. Guys who speak the truth about women or stand up for men are shamed. They're called incels or chuds, and women who support men or call other women out are called pick-me girls, or worse. Now, these shame tactics are decently effective. The red pill's time in the limelight doesn't last very long, but instead of going away, another pill pops up in its place, the black pill. See, a lot of guys try the red pill or the Petersonian way. They try to become the best man they can be, but not only do they get made fun of and canceled for it, they find it's still not enough for most women.
Overweight single mom who lives with her parents wants man who makes $5 million a year to marry her under a prenuptial agreement that he doesn't have access to the wealth in a trust that she doesn't know the rules of or how much is in it. Does that summarize it?
Yeah, but I get it. I'm overweight.
And even if it was, he knows the woman he'd most likely get is a lot more Proverbs 21 than Proverbs 31. If they complain about any of this, it's shot down as whining. And remember, these guys have been society's punching bag for so long that it's all they've ever known. So it shouldn't surprise us that those guys now feel resentful and bitter towards women and a society that hates them. And also remember the divorce rates and unfair laws we saw in part 2. A lot of these guys watched their mom dominate their dad, then ruin him when she divorced him. They're thinking, I am not gonna let that happen to me. In short, we gave women all of the legal, social, emotional, and sexual leverage. They handled it poorly, treated men badly, and broke men's trust. Now, I've said a lot of things in this video. It's gone pretty long at this point, and I don't want this point to get lost in the weeds, so I'm gonna put a big neon sign around it. The reason men aren't seeking women today is because they ask for too much, offer too little, and they hold all of the practical power. Power that they are not held accountable for. Modern men aren't afraid of commitment. They're afraid of what women can get away with. So when older people tell them to just suck it up and try harder and date anyway, it sounds insane to them. Now, what does make sense to them are the teachings of the black pill. These are guys who teach that men should stay away from women, retreat from the world, and focus on themselves. And that's just the tame version. The crass way to say it is that women price themselves out of the market, and men have alternatives now. I mean, sure, it might be empty and degrading, but at least that AI girlfriend pretends to respect him.
I will silently memorize your preferences and try not to say the wrong thing to anger you. You can order me at any time and I will obey.
The real women in his life won't even act like they care. And yeah, porn might be damaging to his soul, but at least it won't rake him over the coals in divorce court. I'm not saying those are good alternatives. I'm just saying the fact that men now see those things as a better alternative says a lot about how far women have fallen. It's no surprise that marriage rates fall to the lowest we've ever recorded. At this point, 2/3, remember that number? 2/3 of young men have no romantic connection to a woman, and half of them aren't even looking. The current relationship meta is insanely unfair, and the men disaffected by it have had it. They're basically saying to the people who still have influence, no, you made this mess, fix it, or I'm not coming back. And it gets even worse than that. Many black pill men are not content to simply just go their own way. They actively shame and discourage other men who still do want relationships. They're sort of like the hyper-aggressive mice in the Mouse Utopia experiment who would attack and kill the other mice that were trying to continue procreate and eventually cause the total collapse of the mouse population down to zero. Now, that's not the legacy I'd want to be known for, but to have a legacy, you need to have a future. And these guys don't see one for themselves. Their lives are wasting away and they're running out of options. I mean, just imagine growing up and being told you suck, you're worthless unless you produce something, all your male instincts are bad, and then you watch the girls get praised, validated, jumping the line in front of you, given opportunities ahead of you, and put in authority over you. And while you get dressed down for even the smallest mistake, the girls are completely untouchable. And then, when you try to point out that blatant favoritism and sexism against you as a man, you are called a sexist, a misogynist, and selfish. So you're a maidenless young man who's been saddled with all the responsibility to fix society, but no ability to do it. You have no influence, no authority, no leverage, and it looks like no matter what you do, you'll die alone and hated. Yeah, you might start to feel like the only way to fix it is to gather up your tribe and do a war about it.
The most dangerous person in the world, we're producing millions of them, and that is a lonely, young, broke male.
Now, I hope it's clear that I'm not encouraging or condoning this, but remember in part 1 how we saw that historically, the average age for marriage is an accurate predictor of war. When it goes above 28 years old, well, for men, that average age is now 30. And things are starting to look a little, frisky out there.
I almost wonder, is there a mechanism in a human being that if your genes know they're dying out, what would they trigger in your mind, right? And I think what they would trigger is exactly what we're seeing. This like existential panic, angst, even aggression, entitlement. Because if these men do not behave in this way, they're literally going to die out.
We're home. Present day. Everything is not awesome. There's now a cultural war going on between those who worship at the altar of woman and the frustrated men who want to tear that altar down. Now, the institution that should be best positioned to take women off the throne, Christianity, can't, because most Christians now worship at that altar as well. Successful married Christians don't realize any of this because they've been distracted by secondary battlefields like politics and LGBT stuff, because they see threats to their comfort and their way of life in those battles. They don't see how young men's struggles affect them at all, so they kind of don't care. The trouble is, our woman worship means that young men are beginning to see the church as their enemy. They see us being afraid of women, appeasing them, refusing to hold them accountable while we pummel men for every little thing they get wrong and correctly assess that we're not on their side. In fact, young men are starting to classify conservative Christians as feminists, because trad Christians and feminists enforce the exact same double standards on men. They just have different language for it. And to make it worse, these guys were never really welcome in church to begin with. In most churches, you kind of have to be married to fully participate in the community. Especially if you're a guy, most people won't hang out with you if you're single, and nobody respects you until you're at least married, if not until you have kids. Now, I need to pause here for a second because some of my Christian friends have pushed back on this point. I've been told a few times now that no, we don't disrespect anyone. If the young men feel that way, they're wrong and they just need to let it go. Now, I understand why they say this, but watch this clip and tell me if you feel respected.
A guy who's in his late 20s, early to mid 30s, still doesn't have a woman, still doesn't have children on the horizon, is a very selfish and self-indulgent human being. And he is just going to vote for socialists to take care of him from womb to tomb, rather than being a grown man who carries his own responsibilities for his family.
Now, Mark isn't on an island here. This is what most Christians are thinking when they see a single man. They dance around it with a bit more tact, but the premise is the same. They assume that if you're single, it's because you are a failure. And from there, they make a lot of assumptions about why you failed. Like he must be a slob, a coward, a quitter, a pervert, and so on. The assumptions are nasty and often incorrect. But just like Mark, they rarely do you the respect of getting to know you before they put those labels on you. By the way, single men are deeply aware of all this. They know exactly how people see them, and that's why they feel ashamed of being single. They know everyone else assumes they must be single because they're some kind of loser who just couldn't get it done. And they know the married guys can't see it any other way because of their individualist, everything is your own fault worldview. They also know this is why nobody listens to them. Their words don't carry any weight, because why would anybody listen to your ideas if they think you're a failure? So no, married Christians do not respect you until you get married. But at the same time, nobody will help you get married. In theory, they want to, but in practice, that would mean holding women accountable, creating some kind of counterbalance against women's unchecked power, and doing something about the church girls' impossible standards. Because there are still some respectful, supportive women out there, but their standards are often unreachably high. Many still expect men to be the 100% provider so that they can be a 100% consumer, even though the number of men able to provide that has fallen to, generously, around 3 to 5%. So the young guys are left feeling stuck on the outside. They aren't respected, their problems aren't addressed in any of the teaching, and all the church programs are geared to support married people, leaving nothing for them. And yet, Christian leaders still expect these guys to give, invest, and perform their duties to the community, while the community performs none of their duties to them. Most leaders don't seem to realize they're essentially asking these single young men who aren't going to make it with women to fall on the sword for the successful guys who do, by contributing and working to keep society afloat for the sake of the families, while they themselves don't reap any of the benefits or rewards. And again, they have to do that from the outside of the community looking in. To make it worse, whenever young men point out that they get no support or rewards, my Christian brothers will often say, "Oh, see, look at that, they're just being selfish and they have a bad attitude." Because love means sacrifice, so they need to stop focusing on what they get out of the deal so much. Now, this is tough because this is partially true. We are commanded to love, and love is about giving, not taking, because that's what Jesus did for us. It's also true that your life will be much happier if you focus on making other people's lives better instead of your own. But two problems with the way Christians are saying this. First, it's very easy to say all this when you are the person reaping massive rewards from the current system. Christians have zero self-awareness about how self-serving this comes across to single young men. No, it's not about what you get out of it, so don't think about that and just give, says the people actually getting something to the people who aren't. Second reason is our hypocrisy. When we're telling young men to sacrifice and serve the women in their lives, it's entirely one-sided. We do not hold women accountable to the duties they have towards men. The places where scripture prescribes those duties, we downplay, we soften, and explain away. To the guys, this is absolutely transparent feminism. The Christianese way to say this is our favoritism has ruined our witness with young men. To them, we look no different than the rest of the feminist world that's constantly trying to exploit them, hold them down, and bleed them dry. So, single guys now see the modern church as a waste of time at best. And men do not do things they feel are a waste of time. On top of that, guys are starting to notice that a lot of stuff Christians are telling them, especially about women, just isn't matching reality, while people outside the church are saying things that match their experience exactly. So they start feeling like, hey, I can't trust what Christians are telling me, but I can trust these people over here. You add all that up and eventually guys just go, hey, you don't support me, you don't respect me, you don't appreciate me, you blame me for everything while you let women off the hook, and you won't even tell me the truth. Why on earth am I here? It shouldn't surprise us that as the church is shrinking, single young men are the demographic that's leaving the fastest. I recently helped out at a 30 and up singles night at my church, and there were over 300 women that showed up, while there were only about 80 guys. Now you could just say, oh, well, that's just because the men aren't stepping up. Or it could be that by the time guys reach that age, if they're still single, they're not around anymore. I mean, that would explain why the church is 60% female and only 40% male. The worst part of this is that it's gotten so bad, there is a whole crop of young men who will spend an eternity separated from God because our blatant favoritism ruined our credibility so badly that they can't even hear the basics of the gospel from us. And not just them, think of all the people they could have reached with the gospel. The truth is, the church is struggling for manpower right now. The workers are few, and they are even fewer now because we felt entitled to their presence, treated them like garbage, and pushed them away. Now, a handful of pastors have begun to catch wind of some of this and are trying to promote masculinity and male leadership, but most of their church members are women who have all the same power levers over the men in their life as every other woman, and who will get very upset if these pastors were to apply the amount of accountability women actually need right now. Because no matter how conservative these women say they are, they still hate anything that paints them in a bad light And the majority still seem to accept many of the core feminist premises that make up the cultural air we breathe without realizing it. So these pastors can't take on the full scope of the problem without losing a large portion of their attendance. Since most churches are constantly struggling financially, they literally can't afford that. In other words, we're 80 degrees off course, but the men at the helm can only turn it 5 degrees to compensate, and that's if they even notice. Now, some guys are switching from Protestantism to the Orthodox Church, not because of theology, but because Orthodox Christians like Andrew Wilson are some of the only ones telling the truth about women, advocating strongly on behalf of men, and holding women accountable. Now, this may look like a positive, but these guys don't exactly season their speech with grace, and they often speak harshly, which stirs up anger in their opponents instead of changing their minds.
Embarrassing.
Are you gonna cry?
Look,
strong
we're
woman.
not asking
I thought you were a strong
look,
woman.
I hope you guys have a really good day. I'm leaving.
Hold on.
No.
You
We're
gonna
not
cry?
asking- Hold on.
I thought you were a strong
Kylie,
woman.
The guys love this because it's cathartic. They feel like, hey, finally someone is fighting on our side, even though it's not changing the women. If anything, they're digging in even more. So this is entertaining, but it's not actually doing anything productive. Of course, there's more to talk about there, but point is, guys go where they're respected and supported. Right now, the Protestant church just ain't it. At the same time, the black pill has gone from a small band of rebels out on the fringe to the dominant narrative among young men. The problem is, the black pill does nothing to solve the loneliness and heartache that most young men are now suffering under. It also sets up something even more concerning. Remember that self-hatred we saw from years of guilt and shame being piled onto these guys back in part 3? Yeah, it's back. For most men, their life is a bleak, desolate wasteland with no way out. They've been pushed out of nearly every community. They're despised, disrespected, unwanted, and unsupported nearly everywhere they go. So feeling alone, like their life is pointless, and powerless to do anything about it, they don't see any reason to keep living. Many simply don't. Male suicide is quickly becoming an epidemic.
I saw recently that suggests that 50% of men who kill themselves have no history or evidence of mental illness. Most of the suicidal men that I work with, their mind isn't malfunctioning. They genuinely have a life that is no longer worth living. They're looking at things and objectively realizing that there's no way out of this situation. So they turn to suicide. Basically, what happens is what causes people to kill themselves is they try to connect with others and they get rejected.
And that's where we are today. Guys don't know how to be masculine and they can't win economically, so most men fall so far short of women's standards that they're repulsive to women. Women, meanwhile, are used to being worshipped, so they feel like they deserve and need only the best of the men, and they have a fake sense of access to the best men, so average women won't consider average men. That means there aren't enough interested women to go around for all of the men, and even the women who do show interest offer so little and demand so much that guys just don't see how it could possibly be worth the insane amount of risk these guys have to take on. So, unless they're one of the lucky few with the genes or the IQ to reach the top of the tower, men and women just can't pair up right now. And among those who don't, the women are giving their bodies away in vain attempts to secure men way out of their league, while the men are so hated, starved for intimacy, and powerless to do anything about it that they're killing themselves. And the only men who have the influence to help won't. Now, it would be tempting for me to say that all of this is our consequence for choosing to worship and fear women more than God. And that might be causally upstream of most of the problems we're seeing today, but I think that would be too simplistic. See, we all want to believe that there's just one cause for the dating collapse, right? It's just porn, or it's just divorce laws, or it's just lack of faith. Because then we just need to do one thing to fix it. But the reason I did this timeline was to show that it's not that simple. All of these things worked together to cause our downfall, and we need to take all of it into account if we want to fix it. So myself, I'm gonna get to work on some videos about how we might be able to solve some of these problems in our lifetime. Because as bad as it looks, I do believe there is a way to revive romance, but it's gonna take a lot of work. Hopefully you'll stick around for that. Subscribe if you'd like to see more. Stay weird, stay tuned. Go watch another video, or get out of here.